Today, Manjunath and I am in a retreat in Nagapur, in Nagaluk. So the retreat is going on downstairs. So let's begin with our study of the Satipatthana Sutta, and we have covered a lot of ground so far on how to cultivate the sati or awareness of the body, of feeling sensations, and of what is called the mind. And now we are looking into the awareness of Dhamma. And we have seen that the Dhamma is a very polyvariant word, has many meanings. And one of the meanings is of the Dhamma is the way it is, or the laws that govern the mind, the law that governs the outside world. And it has also the connotation of the Buddha's teachings. So generally, it has also got that connotation. And in this context, we have seen the awareness of five skandhas in the last class. And today, in this class, we are going to look into how to cultivate the awareness of the six senses. And the knowledge of the six senses is very crucial for us to practice the awareness. Because without having the knowledge of six senses or understanding of six senses, we cannot understand the practice of mindfulness, and we cannot be free. So we have seen that the purpose of Satipatthana Sutta is to free our mind. And as the Buddha says, the person whose mind is free is the great man or great woman. So reading the sutta is one of the way by which we cultivate this awareness of the Dhamma, and we try to know how we experience the world. So as we have seen that whatever we experience is always mediated by our five senses and sensed or cognized by our mind. So we have seen it in the previous classes as to how our five sense doors give rise to the experiences which are cognized and made into the concepts and precepts in the mind. So in this context, we have to understand that there are six senses. Very easy to understand, or very easy to remember, because through them we experience the world. So what are those senses? This one sense that we use dominantly is the sense of eye, the sight, isn't it? So according to the psychologist, we use the most widely used sense is the sense of eye, the sight. So most of our perceptions are coming through what we see, and then what we hear through our ears, then what we smell through our nose, what we taste through our tongue. So this five, and then the touch, because the tactile sense is also very important sense. So these are the five senses. Very easy to remember. If you look at our face, we can see at the top eyes, then ears, then nose, and then tongue, and then the entire body that touches the object, isn't it? So five senses and their five objects. And the sixth sense organ is our mind. It's called mana, isn't it? So together they form the six sense organs. And then there is, if we look at the Yogacara philosophy or Yogacara teaching that we are going to study, there is the seventh sense, which is called the manas, and the eighth is called alaya. Now you see, when we are talking about the senses, there are the sense consciousnesses which are related to every sense. So for example, with related to eyes, there is a eye consciousness. And in the Indian languages, we can call it Chakshu Vidyan or Chakhu Vidyan. Okay. Then there is the ear consciousness, Sota Vigyan. Okay. Then there is a nose consciousness. So with all these 6 senses, there are 6 consciousnesses associated with them. And the consciousness that forms the sense of ego or self is called the manas. And the base of all these experiences is called the alaya vigyan, the storehouse consciousness. So just keep in mind this sevenfold sort of the categorization of the consciousness. So now let me read it first, and then I'm going to elaborate on what we are going to read. So 6 senses, Shadayatan. If you want a Hindi word for that, we can say, or an Indic word for that, we can say 6 Shadayatan. Sha means 6, Aitan means the basis. 6 bases of experiences. Shadayatan, a very important concept, because of Nama Rupa leads to Shadayatan. Now, I will read 6 senses. Furthermore, O monks, a monk focuses on Dhamma and observing the Dhamma in 6 internal senses and external sense objects. So Dhamma here is the way it is. It is the property of anything that we experience. In this case, we are trying to focus our mind on the Dhamma of 6 internal senses and 6 external sense objects. Okay, so now 6 internal senses we have seen: eyes, ear, then nose, then tongue, then skin, and then the mind itself. Okay, and these are the 6 internal senses and the external sense object. So every sense has the object associated with it. For example, with eyes, what is associated is the form, is the shape, is the colors that we see. Isn't it? All the shapes and colors that we see through our eyes, they are called the form. With ears, what is associated is sound. Isn't it? With nose, what is associated with nose is the fragrance. Isn't it? What is associated with our tongue is the taste. And with our body, it's called the contact or fassa. Because the body, when it's contacted by any object, we feel it. We feel it whether it's hard, whether it's soft, whether it's smooth, whether it's not smooth. That all we cognize with the sense of touch. And then there is the mind, object of the mind itself, which is called the Dhamma. So there is another meaning of the word Dhamma. So the object of the mind, the thoughts, the emotions, the mental proliferation that goes on in our minds all the time, they are classified as Dhamma, the objects of mind. And how is this object of mind is formed? It's either formed based on the memory or whatever is brought into our internal sort of senses by the sense objects. So it's very, very clear sort of a thing. And when we understand like this, we begin to see that the entire thing that we experience is always mediated by our senses. We cannot cognize anything. We cannot experience anything without the mediation of the senses. If something which cannot, which we can in our thought processes, we can go to the abstract thoughts, but they are just thoughts. They might be just the mental proliferation. They might be just the daydreaming or the ideas which are going on in our mind all the time. Isn't it? But that can be our fanciful thinking. You see what I'm trying to get it at? So please understand the first paragraph very clearly. 6 senses. And we have seen what are the 6. It's very easy to remember the 6 senses. If we look at our face, we can remember our 6 senses very easily. The eyes, which is sort of a major sense organ, the ears, the nose, the tongue, and the body itself, because the body touches the object. And by that touch, we can cognize. And related to these six sense doors, there are six sense objects. Like the eye sees the form, sees the color, sees the shape. The ears listen to the sounds, isn't it? The nose, feels the fragrance or whatever smell there is. The tongue tastes, and there are, if you look at our sensory perceptions, a wide spectrum of the sensory experiences that we can all experience, isn't it? But if we look at it from the point of view of the Buddha and from the point of view of the Diamond Sutra, the Buddha talks about the five eyes, isn't it? Now we can relate with the five eyes. And I'm going to take some time on, if we are understanding the eyes, which is a dominant sense, we can similarly begin to understand about our oral organ or our olfactory organ, all these sense organs we can understand. So when we are talking about the mansa chakshu or the physical eye, isn't it? We have got this physical eye, and through physical eye, we see the world. Now, likewise, if we look at the animals, they also got the eyes, isn't it? But the way they see the world is completely different than the way we see the world, isn't it? The way we observe, like the birds, it is said that they have very, very different sense of colors around them. Their eyes, their physical eyes, they are differently made. So, the way they see the world is altogether different than us, isn't it? For example, the eye of an eagle, it's a physical eye. But that eye perceives from from a very long distance, isn't it? And as if we look at it a little bit from the scientific point of view, we only perceive what is called the Vibgyor, a very, very narrow part of the electromagnetic spectrum. And we know how this cognition takes place. The light strikes our retina, and the images are formed, electrical signal, and the inverted image is formed, which is interpreted. So what is out there? What is out there is always mediated by our sense doors. So the world that we cognize, the world that we experience, is created, I would say, by the very sense doors. We don't know anything out there without the mediation of the senses. Please keep this point in your mind. So when we are talking about the five eyes in terms of the physical eye, and then there is the so-called divine eye, isn't it? So when we advance in the meditation practices, and by the way of example, we see that we have also extended the limits of our eyes. If you want an example, just for the sake of example, we have a microscope. What we cannot see through our physical eyes, we can see through the microscope, the very, very microbes, isn't it? And what long distances we cannot see through our physical eyes, we can use the telescopes to see the far distances, isn't it? So the very seeing has many levels. Then there is the Prajna Chakshu, the wisdom eye. So the wisdom eye perceives the world very differently. Then there is a Dhamma Chakshu, the eye of the Dhamma, the eye of the truth. And ultimately there is the Buddha Chakshu, the eye of the Buddha. We cannot just talk about the eye of the Buddha. It cannot be just talked about, the experience of the Buddha, the way Buddha cognizes everything, the way Buddha understands. We cannot say it that the Buddha cognizes. You see, how this is very important to us. So seeing, always taking place. When we open our eyes, we cannot but see. It's automatic. When we open our eyes, when there is a sound, we cannot but hear. When there is a smell, we cannot but smell. When there is a taste, we cannot but taste. When there is a touch, we cannot but touch it. So please keep in mind this very beautiful sort of the description of the senses. I'm reading again, 6 senses. Furthermore, O monks, a monk focuses on Dhamma, means the way it is, the truth of it, the characteristic of it, the nature of it, observing the Dhamma in 6 internal senses and external sense objects. And how, O monk, a monk focuses on Dhamma and observing the Dhamma in 6 internal senses and external sense objects. That is a question being asked here. There is the case where a monk knows this is the eyes. You see, so we bring our awareness to a level when we are even aware that of our sensual organs, of our sensory organs. We are aware that this is the eye. And then we are aware that this is the object of eye, this is the form. Isn't it? And then this is the contact or bond that arises due to both. So whenever there is an eye and whenever there is an object, there is a contact, there is a bond that is formed. And where there is a contact, there is the arising of feeling. Whether the feeling will be pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral feeling. Please keep this in mind, okay? There is the case where a monk knows this is the eyes, this is the form, this is the bond that arises due to both. So whenever there is an ear and there is a sound, there will be a contact, a bond will be formed. Because also there is the ear consciousness, there is also the eye consciousness, the 5 consciousness, and the 6th one, the mind consciousness. And the 7th one, what is generally called the ego consciousness, and the storehouse consciousness. Isn't it? The 8th consciousness, the model of mind, the structure of mind that we just, bear in our mind so that it helps in our practice. So you see, he knows how the bond has appeared. He knows how the bond has ceased. And he knows that there is no further appearance of the bond that has been abandoned. So contact, isn't it? This contact we have to be aware of. That when there is an eye and there is an object, there is a bond, a contact. And when we see how that contact arises and how that contact ceases, we observe it as it is. And we see that now there is no further arising of contact. Please understand that the contact is of a great importance to understand. Because of the process of contacting, because of the process of forming this bond with the sense and the object, it gives rise to the contact. And the contact gives rise to what is called the feeling sensation. And we have seen that the feeling sensation is the cause of suffering. Where there is a feeling, there will be always suffering. There will always be suffering. So please understand this relationship. The senses, these sense objects, and the contact that arises between the senses and the sense object, and that contact, that touching, leads to sensations, Vedana. And we have seen that whenever there is the arising of a Vedana, there is always arising of the suffering, Dukkha. Dukkha means suffering. Always it will arise. Where there is a contact, if we are not mindful of the contact. If we are not, I'm going to read something beautiful from another sutta for you today. Just a paragraph. But please bear in this mind, this world, the entire world that we experience is mediated by our sense doors. We cannot experience anything without the mediation of our senses. So we are as if caught in a perceptual world that is created by our senses. We don't know what is out there without the mediation of our senses. Isn't it? And that's why when we talk about the sutta, the Buddha talks about detachment from the sensory world. Isn't it? Letting go of the sensory world. That is the way to become free. The third paragraph goes like this: where a monk knows this is the ear, this is the sound, this is the bond that arises due to both. He knows how the bond has appeared. He knows how the bond has ceased. And he knows that there is no further appearance of the bond that has been abandoned. So likewise, what we have seen for our eyes, the same thing is true for our ears. The same thing is true for our nose. Where among nose, this is the nose. This is the order. This is the bond that arises due to both. He knows how the bond has appeared. He knows how the bond has ceased. And he knows there is no further appearance of the bond that has been abandoned. So contact, touching, all the time this touching is taking place. And wherever there is a touch, it will give rise to the arising of the feelings, the Vedana. And we have seen the mindfulness of Vedana in the previous sections as to how when the pleasant sensation arises, we want to run after it. When the unpleasant sensation arises, we want to push it away. And when there is no awareness, so whatever the neutral feelings are, they condition our ignorance. They make us very stupid if we are not aware of those feelings of what is happening. And how the the Vedana takes place, how is the feeling sensation takes place? Through contact. So the contact, understanding the contact, being mindful of the contact, the bond is very important. And when that bond is severed, we are free. When that bond is broken, when that bond is separated, we are free. Isn't it? So when a monk knows this is the order, this is the bond that arises due to both. He knows how the bond has appeared. He knows how the bond has ceased. And he knows there is no further appearance of the bond that has been abandoned. Where a monk knows this is the tongue. This is the test. This is the bond that arises due to both. He knows how the bond has appeared. He knows how the bond has ceased. And he knows there is no further appearance of the bond that has been abandoned. Where a monk knows this is the body. This is the touch. This is the bond that arises due to both. He knows how the bond has appeared. He knows how the bond has ceased. And he knows there is no further appearance of the bond that has been abandoned. Where a monk knows this is the mind. This is how I cognize. This is how it leads to the formation of the concepts and the precepts. This is how it leads to the formation of the destructive emotions within us. Isn't it? So where a monk knows this is the mind, this is the thinking, this is the bond that arises due to both, he knows how the bond has appeared. He knows how the bond has ceased. And he knows there is no further appearance of the bond that has been abandoned. Now, this paragraph is very important. And please bear in mind. Thus, it is like this. Thus, he focuses on the Dhamma. Dhamma means the nature of it, the very principle of it, the phenomena itself, the phenomena of the sense doors and the objects and the bond that takes place between the sense door and the object. That's the Dhamma. That is knowing as it is, the way it is, not the way we want it to be, not the way we conceptualize in our mind, not the way we speculate in our mind, as it is. The key word when we study the Satipatthana Sutta is as it is, right here, right now. So sometimes when we meditate, when we sit for meditation, we hear a lot of sounds. And we see that when we listen to something, how the contact is created. And when our mind is fully focused on the object of our meditation, the breathing, then we are not aware of the sounds around us. We are not aware of the smells around us because our mind is not completely focused. They are there, but in the periphery, they are not dominating our mind. The sound is not at all irritating us. The smell is not at all irritating us or enticing us. It is just there as it is. Thus, he focuses on Dhamma, observing Dhamma internally. He focuses on Dhamma, observing Dhamma externally. He focuses on Dhamma, observing Dhamma internally and externally, both ways. Or he focuses on Dhamma and observing the arising of the Dhamma. He sees the arising of the Dhamma, the property of it. This is the contact. Now this is the formation of the feeling sensation. Now this is craving. Now this is arising of the suffering. Isn't it? In our own meditation, we can see all this. We can see the entire cycle of how the suffering arises within our own experiences if we practice like this. He focuses on Dhamma and observes the cessation of Dhamma, or else he just observes the Dhamma as it is, only so far as sufficient for the insight and attention on Dhamma. He focuses without attachment. Very important. He focuses without attachment and not clinging to anything from this world. Very key phrase. Do not cling to anything in the world. Just let it go and just focus your attention on the Dhamma, the way it is. You can focus on the arising and the passing away of the contact. You can see, experience how the sound arises and how it passes away. Sometimes, you can, in your meditation, you can see the sounds coming from the distance, the sounds coming from the nearer sources. So please bear in this mind these very beautiful teachings which are there in the Satipatthana Sutta. Only so far as, now, he observed the Dhamma as it is, only so far as sufficient for the insight and attention on Dhamma. This is very important. We don't have to strive much, just sufficient enough for the insight and attention on Dhamma. He focuses without attachment and not clinging to anything from this world. Just so monks. A monk focuses on Dhamma, observing the Dhamma in 6 senses. In other words, we have to observe the way it is without adding anything. Just it is, just as it is, right here, right now. And I think that's a key to understand the mindfulness, the Satipatthana. That's how we establish the sati of the 6 senses. Sometimes it is called that we live in the ocean of senses. So when we open the eyes, we see the sky as far as it goes. We see the flowers, we see so many things around us. So you imagine that this ocean of sight is vast. And we are always tossed up in the waves created by this ocean of sight. We are always tossed up and down by the ocean of sounds, by the ocean of smells, by the ocean of taste, by the ocean of touch, by the ocean of thoughts, isn't it? It's going on all the time. We are tossed up and down. So what the Buddha is saying, just become aware of these sense doors. They are vast and wide. Just see what happens when we perceive something through our eyes. The whole process of cognition that takes place in our mind. Isn't it? The way we sense the world, the way we perceive the world through our 6 sense doors. So this is how we practice the mindfulness of the 6 senses. Very important teaching that we have to pay our close attention to. So now, when I thought I will read something for you from other sutta, which is very relevant to what we are studying here. This sutta is called the Bahya Sutta. And there was this great monk from the central India who went to the Buddha in Shravasti, where the Diamond Sutra was delivered. And there, he asked how I should train myself to the Buddha. So how we should train ourselves, isn't it? How we should train ourselves. I'm going to read this Bahya Sutta in parts. I'm not going to go through the whole sutta, but it's so relevant to what we are studying, how to cultivate the awareness of the sense doors. So please listen carefully. Here in Bahya, you should train yourself thus. In the seen will be merely what is seen. Very powerful sentence. In the seen will be merely what is seen. Not that I am seeing it. Only the seeing is taking place. There is no seer. There is only a process of seeing. I cannot say I see, I hear. This is just a linguistic construction. But actually what is happening is the process of seeing is taking place. The process of listening is taking place. The process of smelling is taking place. And it's a dynamic process, isn't it? There is nobody sitting inside who is seeing. There is nobody inside our body that is listening. There is nobody inside our body that is testing. You see, here in Bahia, you should train yourself thus, and that's how we should train ourselves. How? In the seen will be merely what is seen. In the heard will be merely what is heard. Likewise, in what is tested, there is only testing. There is only touching, isn't it? In the sensed will be merely what is sensed. In the cognized will be merely what is cognized. In this way, you should train yourself by, and this is how we should train ourselves. In the seeing, only seeing. In the heard will be merely what is heard. Not putting our ego consciousness there. I am hearing, I am seeing, I am smelling, I am touching. No, there is only touching. There is only this process. There is only seeing that is taking place. There is no seer. There is no doer. That's why Nagarjuna says that, only doing is there. There is no doer. Only walking is there. There is no walker. Only the thinking is there. It thinks. It is not that I am thinking. It thinks. Isn't it? It senses. It feels. Very profound. When Bahia, for you in the seen, is merely what is seen, and likewise in the cognized is merely what is cognized, then Bahia, you will not be with that. So when you make something into that, I'm seeing that. Listen very carefully. Bahia, you will not be with that. When Bahia, you are not with that, then Bahia, you will not be in that. When Bahia, you are not in that, then Bahia, you will be neither here nor beyond nor in between the two. Just this is the end of suffering. So seeing the process of cognition, not in terms of the ego, but just as it is, the way it is. What happens? That we don't create this polarity of this and that. This object and that object. We just witness the way it is. We don't create the polarity of with that. And because we cognize that, we cognize in that. And when we cognize in that, we create suffering because we create concepts which are not tenable, which are not according to the way it is. Isn't it? Which are based on ignorance, which are not based on the on the perfect seeing. The perfect seeing is called samadhi. So the Buddha has the way of perfect seeing, isn't it? So now through this, this is the end of the suffering. So you see how this sense doors and the contact, and because of the contact, the feelings that arise, and because the feeling arises, there is a craving, and whenever there is a craving, there is a suffering. And whenever there is a suffering, we all know what happens, isn't it? So this is very important for us to understand. This is how we practice. In seen, only seen. In heard, only heard. But what happens when we hear something? Because of our past conditioning, we just, make concepts out of it. We create a world that is not in accordance with the way it is. We create our own sensory world, as it were, and we live in that world. We get locked up in a shell of ignorance. And when we get locked up in the shell of ignorance, there is no wisdom and there is no seeing. There is no perfect seeing. And where there is no perfect seeing, there is an attachment or holding on to the objects. And as we have seen, whenever we hold on to something, the more tightly we hold on to something, the more difficult it to let it go, and it slips through our hands, isn't it? Like if we are trying to hold on to the sand, it escapes. So our condition is like this, that we are falling from the sky and we are trying to hold on to the clouds, isn't it? It's like this all the time. We are trying to take something impermanent as permanent, something that doesn't belong to us as belonging to myself. When we understand the Dhamma, when we see the body the way it is, when we see the Vedana the way it is, when we see the mind the way it is, when we see the very nature of everything as it is, then this contact bond is broken, severed. And when this bond is severed, we are free. So we have always an opportunity to be free. We don't have to add fuel to the fire all the time. We can be just aware. We can just cultivate the awareness. We can just cultivate the sati. And when we cultivate the sati, then we begin to understand the nature of all that we experience. And when we experience the way it is, we are free. And when we are free, we are happy. We are full of peace and we are full of bliss. Isn't it? So I hope that you understand the significance of being mindful, being aware, being attentive to our 6 sense doors. So I will stop here and I will open up the class for any reflection, any discussion that you would like to share with the class. Anybody can, go on. Anybody would like to comment, or anybody would like to reflect on, or anybody would like to share their experiences, or anything that that's on your minds. So this is how you should read the sutta all the time, and then you try to find a connection between the different parts of it, isn't it? Because these teachings are stitched together like a textile. The word for sutra is thread, sutta, and you make text. Text is a textile. The word is the same. So it's the whole making of this beautiful text through weaving of various teachings of in the suttas, isn't it? So when you read like this, when you unravel one thread, then you begin to see its relationship with another part of the sutta. And then that's how you study the sutta. That's how we understand the sutta. And that's how we practice the sutta.
Now, every time, every day, every time, whenever we listen sutras, everything is new. Just everything.
That's true.
And it's still बस समझने की चीज हो रही है कि कैसे समझा जाए कि इन चीजों को, and amazing. Practice में जब whenever we goes to meditation, then it's very help to us.
That's true. That's very true. Good, Avinash bhai. Avinash bhai, very good. Anything else? If not, then we can finish your class today. Nothing like it. Finishing early. If you have anything that's...
Everybody have so many things, but can't in words.
Right. Everybody,
most of people here is in practice, good practice, but it's difficult to say something.
Now, Anant Bhai has raised his hand. So let's go to Anand Bhai. Anand Bhai, you have to unmute
1 minute,
yourself.
1 minute, 1 minute. Yes. You can unmute now. Yes.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Anand Bhai.
I am from Karwar.
Hmm.
I have done 3 sutras. Starting में जब मैं शून्य करता था तब बहुत सारे साउंड सभी कान में आता था. अब जब मैं शून्य करता हूँ तब कुछ नहीं आता है. सब एकदम कॉन्सेंट्रेट होता है ना, एकदम फ्री माइंड होता है. ये विशेषता है शून्य का.
Very good. Very
बहुत
good.
खुश हूँ इसमें.
Very good. Very good. Very good. Because you have been training yourself.
Yes, sir.
You have been training yourself for a long time, and then the
गुस्सा
more you train, the
भी
more benefits you get.
गुस्सा भी कम हो रहा है और नीचे बैठ नहीं सकता था. अब आराम से बैठ सकता हूँ. 99 पे 0 कर सकता हूँ.
Very
यही
good.
फायदा है मेरे लिए.
Very good, Anand bhai. Very good. Very good. Good reflection.
आपका तो टीचिंग तो एकदम फर्स्ट क्लास है. मैं कॉलेज में लेक्चर था, रिटायर्ड हूँ कन्नड़ा लैंग्वेज में. आपका लेक्चर तो बहुत मुझे पसंद आया.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I try hard, sir. I will try hard.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Sir. Okay, Nancy, here we go. Nancy, please.
Good morning to everyone.
Nancy.
Well, I'm so happy, really. I understand, and thank you so much for your teaching. In the group, I have Sunyatees who are living the sutra through introspection and are understanding more and more to observe, recognize, and let go. No,
very good, very good.
So thank you so much.
Very good, very beautiful. There is no choice but let go, because we cannot hold on to something which is changing all the time, isn't it? We cannot hold on to the sounds. Can we hold on to the sounds? No, because the sound by nature is impermanent, and because it's impermanent, we can hear it. Because of the very nature of impermanence, we can see the world. If the world was static, didn't move, we couldn't see anything.
Life is continuous change.
Continuous change. You're right. You're right. You're right.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Nancy. We have Subramaya Saraswati. Please go on. Subramaya Saraswati. Can somebody unmute her? Okay.
Yeah. Good evening.
Good evening.
It's a very good session. Actually, I heard all the points and all. It's a very mind-blowing, important messages. I am doing Shunya every day. I'm very cool, calm, and quiet.
Very good, very good, very good.
Because of Shunya, I am sitting 3 hours.
Wow, that's very good. Very, very good.
Control my mind and all my work.
Very
I will
good.
planning when I am doing Shunya.
Very good. That's excellent.
Then I will practice more and more. Whenever I want more work, like a 15-20 list, I will organize my mind and I will inform my both mind and body
Very
together.
good.
It is a very practical experience. I am practicing every day Shunya, and connecting together is a very important method. You are so many are telling when I am teaching Shunya, they are telling I can't sit more half an hour also. My mind is fluctuate. It will go somewhere. I can't concentrate myself. But I am telling, sit and practice first. First, all of you sit and practice yourself. You control your ways. Then you are practicing nicely and you are enjoying this Shunya.
Beautiful reflection. Very beautiful experience.
Yeah, thank you. Today's session, I'm very enjoy these points also. And each thing is a very good, it is connecting to our like soul. It is
excellent, Subramaya.
Thank you.
Anyone? If not, then we will meet in the next session on the next coming Saturday, and we will have more studies. And as you might have seen, the more we study the sutta, the more clear we get the clarity about how we can practice the meditation, how we can cultivate our awareness. So extremely grateful for joining in today, and see you in the next class. Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining in today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to Manjunath for arranging all this. He's very busy, but he got it arranged very beautifully. So thanks to Manjunath. Thanks to all of you.
We are waiting message, but
You see, Manjunath is showing the session which is going down below.
okay.
Yeah. It's I'm in Nagpur, and the session is going down on the ground floor.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now maybe we can end.
Yeah, we can end. We will end, and thank you so much for
Okay.
joining.
Thank you so much for joining, and everybody feel very happy. Thank you, Mangesa.
Thank you. Bye, dear all.
Bye.
Good morning to everyone. Nice to see you. I'm going to start
Bye-bye.
Sunyatees right now, but thank you so much